Is it focused? Okay, great. West to West to East podcast. This is it. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Nemo. Here we extrapolate the astronomical information that is in creation texts. Extrapolation meaning infer or conclude based on context. I should note that most of what I discussed today is theologically, scientifically, and astrophysically heretical for now. And with that, welcome to episode 4, the SUNS of Adam. This episode is an astrophysical dissection of the Cain and Abel story, or the first murder in Eden. And I'm excited to continue this walkthrough, this astrophysical walkthrough of Genesis with you, chapter 4. It's gonna make way more sense if you've already consumed the Galaxy of Eden episodes. There's 3 of them. I won't be recapping any of them. I'm assuming that people who are listening to this have the context that they need. There will be a test later. One important note about the Cain and Abel story: Genesis chapter 4 is not presented in strict chronological order from the larger Galaxy of Eden framework. That isn't a mistake. The story is preserving the astronomical data, not the linear sequence, because the story describes all of the simultaneous events in a allegorical, symbolic sense. The genealogies carry the sequential records. So the Cain and Abel account preserves a different layer of some of the same events / personifications as described in Galaxy of Eden. With that in mind, this episode continues the transition of Earth as it settles into its new solar configuration. The axial rotation and solar orbits are still stabilizing at the beginning of this chapter. So it's important to note then that Genesis itself, the book of Genesis, is not in chronological order, and that's going to be important for later on. Okay, so Genesis 4, as I said, it's another version of the same decoupling story from Galaxy of Eden. Decoupling was defined in episode 3, the decoupling event, as the second half of creation cycle 2. The Nemanides are no longer describing Earth's break from Uranus. They're describing what the new sky looked like during and after that shift. The Sun, Jupiter, Venus, and the former host body all appear in a new arrangement. Earth's axis is still undergoing reorientation, and this is why the story reads like a family drama, but is still functioning as an astronomical record. So this is a different description of the decoupling event, a little bit different perspective, and the allegory is a little bit different as well. So verse 1 starts with, "Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel." So first you'll notice that this Cain and Abel story, we've dropped the garden and wilderness allegory from Galaxy of Eden and moved to bodily and physical process imagery. The symbolism switched from environmental to bodily process. Eve is giving birth now, and that reflects a celestial rising. And the sons she bears are bodies appearing in the sky. Cain is the sun, and Abel is Jupiter. At a very close visible range, it's likely Jupiter dominated as much of the sky as the sun did at this time. The phrase "with the help of the Lord" matters in that verse because Lord here no longer functions as Lord God. So Lord God planet is Uranus and is Earth's former host body. And here they have sort of downgraded the designation towards Uranus as they've dropped the host body acknowledgement and just notes him as now a gravitational force or a former gravitational force. So now they're just calling Uranus Lord. So it appears the imagery of this verse suggests that Uranus appears to the Nemanides as assisting with pulling Jupiter from under Eve. So she gives birth first to the sun rises in the sky, and then it looks like Uranus pulls Jupiter out from under the earth. So verse 2 specifies Abel was a keeper of sheep and Cain was a worker of the ground. So those are the clues that Cain is the sun and Abel is Jupiter. Jupiter is considered a shepherd because of its many moons and satellites. It keeps a large retinue of 90 plus satellite objects in its orbit. Cain, as the sun, is the one working the ground because the sun now acts upon the earth from above or appears to make the earth rotate on its axis. Keep in mind, Earth's axis is still undergoing reorientation during this story. The Nemanides are describing this reorienting sky. So the sun is no longer hidden in the old arrangement due to the Earth's unstable solar orbit. For the first time, the sun rises from beneath the horizon, whereas before it seemed to constantly stay along or below the horizon. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. The fruit of the ground is a reference to Venus. We established in Galaxy of Eden that Venus is the fruit of the tree of knowledge. It's a fruit of the sun. It has a direct stellar orbit with the sun. It was the gravitational tipping point of Earth being pulled towards the inner solar system. So Venus has risen from beneath the horizon after beneath Uranus in a heliacal rising, which means just before sunrise. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. So Abel also brings an offering. Abel is Jupiter, and Jupiter has a large retinue of satellites, moons. So we consider the fat portions the largest of his moons, the largest of Jupiter's moons at the time, which we don't know for sure, but currently that is Ganymede. So to give you the full picture, this is a triple planetary conjunction, Jupiter having risen first or being highest in the sky, then Uranus following Jupiter, then Venus following Uranus, and lastly the sun rising. The Nemanides have encoded in this story the first planetary conjunction to occur since creation cycle 2 and the establishment of Adam, the atmosphere. So the regard that the Lord has for Abel's offering is shown as Uranus appearing to follow Jupiter's largest moon across the sky while moving away from Venus and the sun. And then it says the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. So Cain was very angry and his face fell. So this pattern doesn't stay. The conjunction doesn't last very long. It appears that gravitationally Uranus gets close to or regards the largest moon of Jupiter, and gets further away or appears to turn away from Venus. So it pulls away from Venus. It seems like Uranus is exiting the inner solar system and going towards the outer solar system. So Cain's anger is allegory for the sun being eclipsed, obscured, or my personal favorite, the sun was rising up above the horizon and then fell back down due to gravitational instability or Uranus exiting the inner solar system. The line, the Lord God said to Cain, "Why are you angry and why is your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire for you is for you and you must rule over it." So that verse 6 is read as a cycle warning. The sun must now rise over the horizon daily and triumph over darkness. And if it doesn't, the world falls back into instability. So sin is not a moral failure, it's polarity. It's the oncoming darkness of night, day passing into night, night being triumphed over again by day. So this verse mostly assists with the flow of the story, and again, so that we have the correct context that this is an astrophysical tale and not a literal one. So that was verses 6 and 7. Verse 8, Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother and killed him. The sun and Jupiter are close to each other in the sky. That's what verse 8 is indicating. The sun being near the horizon and in one of the zodiacal constellations that we know today. But their relationship shifts into some sort of gravitational conflict. The sun spoke to Jupiter. So the sun may have unleashed a solar flare that hit Jupiter and created this sound, and that might have been the visual of the sun killing Jupiter. It could just be extreme solar flares, just a lot of X-class flares or bigger. That does seem like the most likely postulation. This could also reflect an oppositional rising. It doesn't mean that the planets had any type of magnetospheric exchange. It could be that they had a close encounter or a grazing alignment, or just a moment where one body, likely the sun, had visually overwhelmed Jupiter. So the killing language preserves the disappearance of Jupiter from prominence. And so the light of the sun blocks out Jupiter/Abel from daytime visibility because the Earth is still going towards the inner solar system or getting closer to the sun. So Abel/Jupiter is not then literally erased or killed. He's displaced from daytime visibility, no longer visible while the sun is, because the sun is climbing higher in the sky and getting closer and brighter. There's a more direct solar angle, a more direct angle of solar radiation hitting the Earth. So I just hit my nose on the microphone. This fits the broader pattern of celestial encodings. What is killed in myth is often what is hidden, eclipsed, or moved out of ordinary sight. The line also suggests an interaction between light, motion, and atmospheric disturbance. If these bodies were close enough in the sky to produce such a meaningful event, and it does seem to be that way, the Nemanides would encode it as violence because that's the strongest human language available for cosmic loss. And they had no idea, I don't know if I already said this, the Nemanites had no idea what language humans would speak today or in the future. So they had to reference the symbolism and allegory towards things that would always exist, like murder, and gardens. Murder, gardens, and childbirth. All right. So Jupiter has been kicked out of daylight appearances because Earth was moved further away from Jupiter towards the inner solar system, and the sun's light now blocks Jupiter's. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And the Lord said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground." This is a really fun clue. The blood crying from the ground can actually be read as red. It can be read as red atmospheric phenomena. Meteor activity, lightning, volcanic discharge, or other high energy sky effects associated with this decoupling event. So the ground receives what falls from above. The sky leaves a red mark. I did do some research, which I forgot to include here, and I'm not going to go back and do it now, that indicated a long time ago, Earth was hit by a series of meteors that were made from nitrogen striking the atmosphere in high altitude, which colors as red. It appears red. So there's different colors of meteors that hit our atmosphere, and that's how you know what they're made of. So it's likely that these were primarily nitrogen meteors that were striking Earth's atmosphere, making a loud noise, and that was Abel's blood crying from the ground. So the blood imagery reinforces the idea that the Nemanites were tracking this celestial disturbance, a sequence of celestial disturbances, and what happens in the sky is echoed in the atmosphere below. So verse 11, "And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and wanderer on the earth." This so the sun is now cursed to no longer remain along the horizon. So Earth will no longer experience endless dawn/twilight type of day. It must move now across the apex of the sky day after day, wandering through the center rather than lingering at the horizon. So the wandering from day to day is the curse. That's why Cain is a wanderer. Verse 13, "Cain said to the Lord, 'My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground,'" or away from the horizon, "'and from your face I shall be hidden, because the light of the sun blocks out the light of the other planets. I shall be a fugitive and wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me.' Then the Lord said to him, 'Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold.' And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden." So Uranus appears to gravitationally drive Cain away from the horizon towards the center of the sky. The sun will no longer be able to see Uranus during the day because its light blocks out the other planets and stars. And the sun feels lonely because it no longer has the company of the other planets and stars, and is also constantly chased by night. Thus, he says, "Whoever finds me will kill me." So for the Nemanites, it just went from always looking like sunset to this bipolar, very bright day. And they see that this day is sort of being chased by this darkness. So the command that ties Cain's survival to everyone else's survival is really discussing how everyone's survival, or life on Earth specifically, is completely dependent on the sun's existence. The sevenfold warning means the survival of everyone is tied to the survival of the sun. If the sun is permanently destroyed, everything collapses. The consequence of killing the sun would be catastrophic beyond the loss itself. So the vengeance decree from Uranus is a little similar to the curses that were placed on the snake, Adam and Eve, when the fruit was eaten. It's similar, not in the same format, but it's similar to the Mesopotamian curse formula, or the way that they would update their astrophysical laws. So Cain is now set to rise in the east of Eden, which in this framework points towards the galactic center and the new rising direction of the sky. So the Nemanites now need to explain their new reality, which is in constant phase, or always progressing forward. And the best way they can do that is to order the information in sequential order so that it's obvious to various languages and societies what it is exactly they're talking about. That's why it doesn't make exact sense. So the Nemanites knew we would need to know this information, and as I said before, they didn't know what language and from what perspective we would be speaking from. Languages not only have specific words, but they have perspectives that they speak from, and the way that they order information. So they formulate this sequential information for us in the next verses in the genealogies. 17 says, Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. So this is a bit of a genealogy. Cain knows his wife. His wife isn't specified, but we assume that Cain's wife is daytime Eve or daytime Earth. So Cain the sun sets on the west side. That's the conception, the sun going down. He knows his wife. He's gone all the way around her. And she conceives and bears Enoch. So once he goes down and begins to rise on the other side, the light of the sun is Enoch, or daylight, or sunrise, the first light of the morning. When Cain built a city, or the first full axial rotation was completed, he called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch, or daylight, daytime, sunrise. So that's where the story shifts from raw transition into system building. The word Enoch comes from a root meaning dedication and initiation, implying a person or a thing that has been established with purpose or trained for a specific function. So Enoch is not the sun itself, it is the light of the sun. And in that sense, the city mirrors a stable orbit or stable axial orientation. So the Earth has now settled enough for some sort of lasting framework to emerge, or some sort of predictable framework. So that is the history of how the day and night cycle started. So verse 18, this is the continuation of Cain's genealogy, or the sequential information for the day-night cycle. So to daylight was born Irad, sunrise, and to Irad fathered Mehujael, or midday, and Mehujael fathered Methushael, sunset, and Methushael fathered Lamech, which is night. And how do we know Lamech is night? Because the pattern of names and meanings suggests a progression rather than random lineage. So Irad, Mehujael, Methushael, and Lamech can be read as stages in the development of the daily cycle that graduates into Lamech, or nighttime. Lamech is especially important and specifically distinct because he breaks the naming pattern on an etymological level. The rupture of that name signals a kind of opposition or asymmetrical force. Verse 19, and Lamech took 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada or Ada, who is the first watch, first sky half, west side of the sky. The name of the other is Zillah, which is the east side of the sky, her second watch. Ada bore Jabal, which is a reference to nighttime Jupiter. So undead Abel, if you will. And he was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock, because again, Jupiter was thought of as a shepherd. Verse 21, his brother's name was Jubal. This is a reference to Saturn. He's the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain, Mars, and I think Tubal-Cain is like it means like mini Cain, mini sun, because Mars at one point was extremely volcanic. It has the largest volcanoes in the solar system, and at one point they were all sort of going off at the same time, one massive super eruption. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron, and the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah, or Venus. So the 2 wives can be read as the opposite sky halves, as I said. His children map onto the expanding planetary order then. Lamech's children, Jubal, Tubal-Cain, and Naamah. The whole sequence becomes a cosmological family tree. So now we move to the Lamech cycle, the night cycle, the progression of night back into day. 23. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is 7-fold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. So, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. It looks like sound must have traveled a little bit differently during the night. And that's what Lamech is the first night. I have killed a man for wounding me. Lamech kills Cain for disrupting the current order of things. It appears to kill Cain in the sky or swallows it. The sun falls beneath the horizon and the night takes over the sky. So this part of the story is more similar to that Mesopotamian curse formula. So it's another astrophysical update by the Mnemonides. So if Cain's revenge is 7-fold, so the first daytime lasted approximately 77 years. Then the first night lasted 77-fold, or 777 years. That number is verified in the next chapter, in chapter 5. So nighttime, or Lamech, lived 777 Mnemonide years before the next sunrise occurred. So the first night was significantly longer than the first day. So axial rotation, or the RPMs are still sort of revving up at the moment. In this reading, night kills the sun for the first time. And this is the Mnemonites' first experience of day and then night. And they were generous enough to record it for us in this manner so that one day we could use this information. We're in the last few verses. And we kind of switch again. So we switched off from the genealogies and the curse formula, and we're back to the allegorical story. Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. So Jupiter was pushed out of daytime viewing. And Seth is a reference to the water canopy that forms in and is mentioned. I mentioned that in Galaxy of Eden Part 1. The covering of skins that God made for Adam and Eve. This is a simultaneous event, it appears. So this, again, not in chronological order. The story is just there to verify all the events that did occur, not the sequential order of events. For most of them were happening at the same time. So this water canopy, or Seth, appears to have been something like snow high up in the atmosphere that maybe the most external part of it solidified into various large pieces. It kind of encased the earth, and that's who Seth is. He's the son of the atmosphere, son of Adam. 26 says, to Seth also was a son born, and he called his name Enosh. And at that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. So considering the logic of all the previous sequential genealogies we've been given, the daytime genealogy, the nighttime genealogy, and that was the first day genealogy, then the first night genealogy. This now is the second day genealogy. So Enosh is the next day, or the second day, day 2. And at this point is when civilization is prosperous enough to have relatively large-scale religion, or the trauma of this creation cycle, specifically the decoupling event, has now become a cultural memory and ritual. It appears that in this case, religion seems like a large-scale response to cosmic disruption and the fear it creates, because it seems to be a survival response to unpredicted planetary trauma. So Genesis 4 adds some additional detail to the larger Galaxy of Eden framework. It shows the sky after the fall, not just before, and it preserves the first organized pattern of solar day life in the New World. The first day, the first night, and then it talks about the second day. So this is a simultaneous continuation of the Adam and Eve record, and it tells us how the sun became a visible ruler of the New World, how Jupiter and Venus fit into that order, how day and night became, and how human culture began to formalize the memory of the event into ritual, lineage, and worship. So the meaning of the Sons of Adam episode, the Cain and Abel story, it's a different perspective of the decoupling event. The Nemanides, once again, they've preserved a world shift for us in story form, in symbolic allegory. They encoded it and they saved it for us. They put it in enough places so that we could find it. And it's very important. It's going to be so important one day. Most importantly, this story is not about human error and sin, which I personally love. And this removes the blame of sin from humanity onto these traumatic celestial events. So I can't really say enough how not sinful humans are. Is one of my biggest points. One of the biggest points I want to make is mankind is not inherently sinful. We are inherently surviving. It does appear that we are built to survive. So I guess that's all I have to say today. Good night. I love you. I'll see you in the morning.